Good day, everyone. We are the reporters under Module 12, which is European Literature. I'm Miss Francheska Galicia, together with Miss Vanessa Bongalon, Miss Quirina Boroy, and Miss Camille Piñon. Next, so we will discuss the Pygmalion and Galatea by Phoebus Ovidius Naso, Les Miserables by Victor Hugo, and Out to the West Wind by Percy by Shelley. Next, so what is European literature? Western literature, also known as European literature, is the literature written in the context of Western culture and the languages of Europe, as well as several geographically or historically related languages such as Basque and Hungarian, and is shaped by the periods in which they were conceived, with each period containing prominent Western authors, poets, and pieces of literature. Characteristics of European literature. This period includes an interest in the common man and childhood, emotions and feelings, and awe of nature, emphasis on the individual, needs, and the importance of the imagination. In colloquial speech, European literature often is used as a synonym for Western literature, and it is a part of the word literature. It includes literature in many languages.
Ayan, so we are now going to our first topic, which is the story of Pygmalion and Galatea by Publius Ovidius Naso. Ayan. Publius Ovidius Naso, born on March 20, 43 BC, known in English as Ovid. He was a Roman poet who lived during the reign of Augustus, and he was a contemporary of the older Virgil and Horace, with whom he is often ranked as one of the three canonical poets of Latin literature. So here are the characters. Pygmalion. He is a young sculptor who despises women but becomes infatuated with an exquisite statue of his own creation. Next is Galatea, the figure of a beautiful young woman sculpted in ivory by Pygmalion. After Pygmalion passionately desires it, Aphrodite intervenes on his behalf and animates the statue. And of course, we have Paphos, son of Pygmalion and the humanized statue, which is Galatea. And the last one is Venus, is Roman name for the goddess of beauty and love, and in Greek mythology, her name is Aphrodite. Let's go now to the summary of Pygmalion and Galatea. Pygmalion derives its name from the famous story in Ovid's Metamorphoses, in which Pygmalion, who is the sculptor, decides to live alone unmarried. He is disgusted by the simple and shameful life of the women of this era. He creates a beautiful statue of art, more perfect than living women. The more he looks at her, the more he loves her until he wants her to be more than a statue. The statue is Galatea, and because of lovesick, Pygmalion goes to goddess Venus' temple and prays to give him a lover like his statue. Venus is used to produce emotion and Galatea is brought to life. Then, when Pygmalion comes back from the temple of Venus and kisses its statue, it comes to life. Soon Pygmalion and Galatea got married under the blessing of the goddess of love. From this union was born Paphos, who would one day found a city of honor in Venus. So for the setting of the story, Pygmalion and Galatea live out their days in the city of Paphos, located west of the Troodos mountain range along the western coast of Cyprus, which is the city is also north and west of Aphrodite's rock. Next is the exposition. Pygmalion is an artist. He is a woman hater and decides never to marry. He creates statue of a woman so lifelike and realistic. Next is the rising action. Pygmalion falls in love with his statue and longs for her to be real. Then the falling action is Pygmalion is prepared to ask the goddess to find him a maiden like the statue. But instead, Venus turns the statue into his perfect maiden. For the conflict, during the whole story, even though Pygmalion said he would never get married, Pygmalion was troubled with the fact that he fell in love with the statue. And the climax is Venus, the goddess of love, becomes interested in this man because he is different than all the other that have crossed her path. And the resolution, Pygmalion and Galatea get married under the blessing of Venus, and from this union, they had a child named Paphos. So let's go now from to themes and symbolism. So for the themes, man has power over woman. In the story, Pygmalion predictably carves a young, smooth, and super hot woman. She is totally silent too, so he can project all his fantasies on her. Then next is art imitating life. So the artists, mahilig silang i-connect yung art nila sa real life. So sometimes, mahirap i-differentiate kung anong pinagkaiba ng totoo sa hindi totoo. In the Pygmalion myth, the boundary between arts and life gets very blurry because Pygmalion makes a statue so lifelike that he starts treating it like a real person. So even as he touching it, he keeps thinking it might be real. When the statue finally comes to life, the division between art and life completely falls away. And now she's actually a real person. So art is life and life is art and it's all mixed up. So physical beauty, this myth just takes pleasure in describing a woman's body parts. So Pygmalion talks a lot about her fairness, like smooth white skin. Ay wait, di pa ako tapos. Next is obsession and self-denial. Pygmalion devotes himself slavishly to a female idol, worshipping her, taking in her luxurious presence, and fantasizing in some very extreme ways. So, ayun. Next is the symbolism, statue of a woman, which is si Galatea. So, siya yung the main symbolic image of this story. And it has two concepts to convey. First is love advice from ancient myth, and second is romantic ideas are people too. Then next one is the reclusive artist. So the man who is not really capable of coping with the environment and the people in it, usually because he is super sensible, and that is Pygmalion. Next is extravagant gifts. Dito, si Pygmalion, nagbibigay siya ng mga extravagant gifts sa statue na napapakita in their times na kapag mahal mo or gusto mo yung isang tao, magbibigay ka ng mga exotic exotic gifts like parang expensive ganon, like jewelry, pearls, shells, rings, earrings, beautiful stones, singing birds, flowers, and even talking parrot. And lastly, the body parts. This intense focus on her body, which is Galatea. So it speaks to the fact that Pygmalion's personality isn't really interested in the statue. Instead, he centered 100% on her half bod. This reinforces the myth that only one thing that matters about a woman is her body. So a message that in contemporary culture sadly gets repeatedly a lot. Next, oral explanation of the story. Pygmalion and Galatea's love story was so unique and difficult to define it. But for any love story, one thing is clear. Man can never love an inanimate object with as much passion as he loves a living, breathing being. Love gives rise to desire, and without this passion, any love remains unfulfilled. And that is all about the story of Pygmalion and Galatea. Thank you for listening.
So, good afternoon to everyone. So, I am Camille, so one of the reporters for the Les Miserables novel by Victor Hugo. Next. So, who is Victor Hugo? So, Victor Hugo is considered to be one of the greatest French writers of all time. He was born in France, and he is also a French poet, dramatist, and novelist. So, most of his artworks are about lace and ghosts, the mouth of darkness, and more. So, so you can see here the poems that he wrote. So, one of his best known novels is known the Les Miserables. So, this story is about the ex-convict Jean Valjean. So, pa-next po. So the summary for this Les Miserables novel, so Les Miserables is the story of many people, so but the line that binds them together is the story of the ex-convict Jean Valjean, so who becomes a force for good in the world. However, he cannot escape his past. So Valjean was arrested and he was sent to prison, and he served for 19 years for stealing a loaf of bread and frequently trying to escape. So after his release, he searches for a place that will take him in and feed him. So he searches, and his lack for searching is turns him to when he meets Mariel, who is a kind bishop and who forces Valjean to change his way. So Valjean also makes his own business and takes in an employee who is named Pantine. So Pantine is a daughter has a daughter who she left with another family so that she could find a work. And when Pantine dies after being ill and from the shock of learning Valjean's identity, so Valjean makes it his duty to watch after her daughter Cosette. And the trials that Valjean faces and his adopted daughter, Cosette, led him in a journey of the soul and changing his ways and his life. So about this novel, Les Miserables, it centers on the character Jean Valjean. So he is an ex-convict in 19th century in the France. So the story spans many years as it tells of Valjean's release from prison and reformation. So as an industrialist, while being constantly pursued by the morally strict inspector named Jabber. So in this time, he encounters a plethora of characters in Paris such as Fantine, which I said earlier, who is a single mother who works as a prostitute to provide for her daughter Cosette, and Marius, a student and revolutionary who falls in love with Valjean's adopted daughter Cosette. So this novel, it presents a vast panorama of Parisian society and it contains many famous episodes and passages. Among them is a chapter on the Battle of Waterloo and the description of Valjean's rescue of Marius by means of flight through a sewers in the Paris. So we can see that this Les Miserables novel are concerned with the social issues in 19th century urban France. And that's why Victor Hugo uses this novel to deliver critiques of wealth distribution, the justice system, industrialism, and republicanism. Next. So next is the characters in this novel. So the major characters are Jean Valjean. So he is the ex-convict who had been in prison for stealing a loaf of bread. So he is the primary protagonist. Next is the Bishop Muriel. So he is the benevolent priest of the first book whose just generosity and self-sacrifice changes Valjean. And another one is Cosette. Cosette, so the child of Fantine whom Valjean raises as his granddaughter. And next is Jabber. So he is the inspector of police whose lifelong ambition is to put Valjean back behind bars. Another major character is Marius. So he is a college student and idealist who falls in love with Cosette. Next is M. Gillenormand. So he is the grandfather of Marius. Thénardier is the paragon of evil, both in character and in representation of other negative forces. So the other minor characters are Eponine, M. Fauchelevent, Eponine, Enjolras, Gavroche, Colonel George Montmorency, Trump Matthew, Felix Tolomei, and Azelma. Next.
To continue, next is the setting. Les Miserables is set in multiple locations in Paris, often featuring places populated by the impoverished and downtrodden. downtrodden. Victor Hugo employs realist elements to tackle complex issues in urban French society. The novel contains multiple conflicts and subplots, but the major conflict threaded through the book is between Valjean and Javert. Valjean struggles to transform himself from a thief into an honest man. Over the years, he struggles to stay a step ahead of the zealous police officer Javert and tries to raise his adopted daughter Cosette. That was the main major conflict of the novel. Next slide po. Les Miserables is actually a lot of little stories all rolled into one. Therefore, the plot structure will be different per story. However, there are three scenes that we can say the rising action of the novel. First is when Valjean's real identity was disclosed as Trump Matthew's trial. Trump Matthew is a poor uneducated man who unfortunately resembled Jean Valjean so much that he is identified and almost convicted as Valjean. Second was Valjean rescues Cosette from the Thénardier. He pays money so that Cosette can take time off on Christmas Eve. He pays the sum of 1,500 francs to Thénardier without hesitation. And the third was Marius' first sight of Cosette in the Luxembourg garden. Marius' first encounter with Cosette when she was only 14 years old. They don't fall in love at first sight, but few months later when they met again, Cosette was grown into a beautiful young woman, and Marius falls in love with her then. The climax of Les Miserables was Marius, Valjean, and Javert's dramatic interactions at the barricade, wherein Jean Valjean rescuing Marcus from the barricade. Marius has been shot and is in desperate need of medical care. Valjean drugs him unconscious to the Paris sewers. As the rebellion hits its climax, Marius is conveniently shot through the shoulder and passes out, as the French army slaughters all of his rebel bodies. The falling action of the story will be Marius and Cosette's wedding and Jovert's suicide. Jovert's committed suicide, plagued by the thought that he may be living a dishonorable life. He makes this decision not with any emotional hysterics, but rather with a cool determination. It is difficult to feel anything other than pity for Javert. The theme of the novel, next slide po. Next slide po. The novel would be the importance of love and compassion, the social injustice in 19th century France, and the long-term effects of the French Revolution on through society. We can only definitely observe all of that when reading the novel. The samples of the novel are Muriel's silver candlesticks, snakes, insects, and birds. The candlestick on the novel symbolizes the contrast between light and darkness, emphasizing the differences between Muriel and Valjean. Muriel passed the candle to Valjean as a reminder to a promise to become an honest man. As of the snakes, insects, and birds, Yulo uses animal imagery to accentuate the qualities of the characters. Next slide, four. Next slide. Next four. Next slide. Four. Thank you. The appropriate moral of the story would be love and sincerity, forgiveness, sacrifice, and justice. And may I add as the analysis of the novel, Les Miserables without a doubt, that there are many recurring themes of biographical outlines for characters. Along with that, there is the aspect of forgiveness, courage, and sacrifice. These are only a few of the main themes Hugo wanted to build up in Les Miserables. Victor Hugo's target was to write a historical novel. This is expressed through the way the novel is affected by the French Revolution. It's all about Les Miserables. Next topic and reported.
So next po, okay, let's now proceed to the Ode to the West Wind by Percy Bysshe Shelley. Next. So who is Percy Bysshe Shelley? He was one of the major English Romantic poets, who was born on August 4, 1792 at Warnham, United Kingdom. He was died at July 8 in the year 1822 in Larisi, Italy. Period Romanticism, place of burial non-Catholic cemetery, Rome, Italy, and spouse is Mary Shelley. Next. So those are the major works of Percy Bysshe Shelley, and isa na doon yung Ode to the West Wind. Next.
O wild west wind, thou breath of autumn's being, thou,
from whose unseen presence the leaves dead are driven, like ghosts from an enchanter fleeing, yellow and black and pale and hectic red, pestilence-stricken multitudes. O thou, who chariotest to their dark wintry bed the winged seeds, where they lie cold and low,
each like a corpse within its grave, until thine azure sister of the spring shall blow her clarion o'er the dreaming earth, and fill, driving sweet buds like flocks to feed in air, with living hues and odours plain and hill. Wild spirit, which art moving everywhere, destroyer and preserver, hear, oh hear. Thou on whose stream, mid steep skies' commotion, loose clouds like earth's decaying leaves are shed, shook from the tangled boughs of heaven and ocean, angels of rain and lightning, there are spread on the blue surface of thine airy surge, like the bright hair uplifted from the head of some fierce Maynard, even from the dim verge of the horizon to the zenith's height, the locks of the approaching storm. Thou dirge of the dying year, to which this closing night will be the dome of vast sepulchre, vaulted with all thy congregated might of vapours, from whose solid atmosphere black rain and fire and hail will burst. O hear! Thou who didst waken from his summer dreams the blue Mediterranean, where he lay, lulled by the coil of his crystalline streams, beside a pumice isle in Bay's Bay, and saw in sleep old palaces and towers quivering within the waves' intenser day, all overgrown with azure moss and flowers so sweet, the sense faints picturing them. Thou for whose path the Atlantic's level powers cleave themselves into chasms, while far below the sea blooms and the oozy woods which wear the sapless foliage of the ocean, know thy voice, and suddenly grow grey with fear, and tremble and despoil themselves. O hear! If I were a dead leaf thou mightest bear, if I were a swift cloud to fly with thee, a wave to pant beneath thy power, and share the impulse of thy strength, only less free than thou, O uncontrollable! If even I were as in my boyhood, and could be the comrade of thy wanderings over heaven, as then, when to outstrip thy skiey speed scarce seemed a vision, I would never have striven as thus with thee in prayer in my sore need. Oh, lift me as a wave, a leaf, a cloud. I fall upon the thorns of life. I bleed. A heavy weight of hours has chained and bowed one too like thee, tameless and swift and proud. Make me thy lyre, even as the forest is. What if my leaves are falling like its own? The tumult of thy mighty harmonies will take from both a deep autumnal tone, sweet though in sadness. Be thou, spirit fierce, my spirit. Be thou me, impetuous one. Drive my dead thoughts over the universe like withered leaves to quicken a new birth. And, by the incantation of this verse, scatter, as from an unextinguished hearth, ashes and sparks, my words among mankind. Be through my lips to an awakened earth the trump. O wind, if winter comes, can spring be far behind? Ode to the West Wind, written by Percy Shelley, narrated by Jordan Harling.
So yung video na pinanood natin is kind of a poem or an ode. So yung Ode to the West Wind kasi, kung mapapansin natin, ang nagsulat is si Percy Bysshe Shelley, and sa katunayan, 5 stanzas lang siya, and kinikilala siya as poems. But originally, it is an odes. And it is necessary sa isang ode writer na mag-create ng lyrical stanza dahil nga ang odes are usually lyrical. So sa isang ode, a poet always expresses his joy for an event, or gina-glorifies nila yung mga natural objects. Katulad na lang ng mga nabanggit, and obvious naman po sa title, which is Ode to the West Wind, yung West Wind pa lang is a natural objects. And in fact, he is known for just writing poetry with a strong lyric structure, and yung Ode to the West Wind po is a strong example in which his imaginative explanation of nature proves that he writes structural poetry with lyrics. So, yung poet na to, or yung poem, is naglo-glorifies ito ng nature. So, si Percy Bysshe Shelley is he personifies the winds and assigns it human powers. So, dinedestroy nito lahat in an autumn season. Dahil sa literature, ang poets daw and writers is ginagamit ang autumn season para ma-express yung themes of despair. So, bakit nga ba ginagamit yung autumn season to express themes of despair? Alam naman natin lahat, so we all know that autumn season is about yung kumbaga paglalagas. So parang doon ipapakita ng mga odd writer or ng mga poets kung saan yung naibibigay nila yung mga mensahe na tugma doon sa season. So Shelley also does the same dahil sa poem niya, he creates a melancholic atmosphere kung saan he uses the natural objects, west wind. So again, yung poem is nagko-contain siya ng 5 stanzas but the subject matter sa poem ay hindi nababago. So sa first stanza, ang poet is or Shelley directly addresses the west wind and gusto niya ipakita sa kanyang readers yung power ng wind. So sa stanza na to, he describes it as a natural phenomena. So parang journey of life from birth to death. So in apparent meanings po, si Shelley is sinasabi niya or he talks about the capabilities of the wind. Na parang the wind is invisible yet it can scatter the leaves. Kung saan makikita yun sa first stanza. And kung mapapansin niyo din po, kung napanood niyo kanina sa video, he also described the colors of leaves as yellow, black, di ba may pale, yung white and red. So the wind moves like like sick people daw. Kasi nga daw, without the wind, leaves cannot move spontaneously. So therefore, it is the wind which helps them to move from one point to another. So parang nga namang mga taong may sakit. So without the help of other people, they can't move. So parang ganun po yung sinasabi dito sa first stanza. And dito, as readers, I do not only realize Shelley's treatment of nature as an object of prime inspiration, kundi as a source of natural phenomena. And we can see wind as an alive human or alive object of nature which performs an action para sa welfare of society and humanity. And dito din po, inimagine ni Shelley yung power of wind and pinapakita niya sa kanyang readers that wind is definitely a source of ingenuity. On the second stanza naman po, kung kanina is wind not only scatters the leaves, dito naman, wind not only scatters the leaves but also moves the clouds in the sky. So sinasabi na without wind daw, clouds are helpless katulad na lang ng mga leaves and flowers are powerless on earth. So parang si Shelley is pinapraise niya lang naman yung beauty and duty of the west wind which helps the clouds to move to a specific location and cause rain on earth. So if I'm going to give a more realistic explanation or example about this on the second stanza, kumbaga parang tayo, we can't move to a specific location or we can't be educators without the help of our teachers. So parang ganun po. And sa stanza na to is ma-observe din ng readers that the clouds and winds are not full of actions but also act as if they are alive human beings. Katulad na nga lang ng mga binigay ko na examples na inihaling tulad ko sa atin na students and teachers. So, lahat kasi ng romantic poets or writers has their specific attributes, and similarly, it is Shelley's poetry's characteristics that he blows soul in different objects of natures. So, sa third stanza naman po, so gumamit sa third stanza si Shelley ng mga places or images like blue Mediterranean, crystalline streams, Alpes, bay, palaces, and towers as beautiful images dito sa stanza na to. So, he imagines the presence of winds on those areas of Earth and pinapakita niya and gusto niya makita ng readers kung ano ba yung itsura and yung nararamdaman ng mga places na yun kapag doon na daw yung wind, pag doon na siya nag-blows. So, Dito, kung mapapansin natin, he ends every stanza with the sentence, "Oh here." So it means that he is trying to talk to the wind as he has imagined it as a lively human creature. So next, sa fourth stanza naman, dito, ang romantic poets nga kasi is kine-consider siya as kino-consider nila yung nature as their prime duty. Gusto nilang i-explore yung nature. Bakit? Kasi nga, they escape from realistic world and find pleasure in the imaginative world. So, yung si Shelley is, ginawa niya yung same thing na ganon. So, he escaped from the harsh world and feels himself in the arms of the wind. Katulad na lang nung nasabi niya na, "If I were a dead leaf, thou mightest bear. If I were a swift cloud to fly with thee." So, iyon yun. So, katulad na lang ng na-mention ko kanina, ang romantic poets is love nature from the cores of their hearts. And si Shelley is isa siya sa list of romantic poets, but therefore, he wishes to fly with the west wind and wants to see each and every place explanation of which he gives in the last stanza dito sa ode na to. And he also requested the wind to take him with it, but in reality, hindi naman yun mangyayari. So, kasi parang ang binibigay niya dito na message is reality is harsh because expectations hurt a person too much. Hence, escapism is the only solution for every such problem. And I am 100% disagree with that. So, sa stanza na to is evidently shows escapism as the most important characteristic of romantic poetry. And poets desires to fly to a faraway land which is essentially which is free from the pains and miseries of life, is evident that he loves fantasies. So thus, he prays to the west wind to lift him and take him away from the stubborn miseries of life. Kasi sa tingin niya, pag nadalas daw siya ng west wind is mawawala na lahat ng problema niya. And sa last stanza or sa final lines ng ode na to, the poet portrays themes of melancholy and despondence. And si Shelley is, alam niya that he can never fly with the wind, but he wishes to do so. However, nung na-realize niya na he cannot go with it, so nalungkot siya. And alam naman natin na natures always attract romantic poets. Hence, he insists on going with it. So despite the fact that it is impossible for him to go and fly with the wind, nag-request pa din siya that he wants to be part of the west wind until the spring comes and takes over the winter. So undoubtedly, sa final stanza ng poem na to, si Shelley is pinipraise niya yung destructive power of the west wind and wants it to be part of it. So yung poem na to is do not seem political or social from any angle. Yet some critics kasi is nagkaroon ng arguments that there are certain elements in this poem that makes it social. So Shelley talks about social change. So in what way? So the wind that sows the seeds, scatter the leaves, and change the location of clouds are symbols that the poet used for explanation to social change in his Ode to the West Wind. So thus, you see Shelley shows that the society is moving towards destruction and portrays change as the law of nature. That's all. Thank you for listening. Again, we are the reporters under Module 12, which is the European literature.